Hello everyone, this is Lilia Perez, Grants and Programs Manager for Arts Mid-Hudson. I just wanted to create a short video for all of you as you are wrapping up your applications for the Ulster County Cultural Services and Promotion Fund that kind of goes over some of the basics of the program, which I'm sure you're all aware of, but I just want to clarify some common questions that have been coming up and some common advice that I've been giving to a lot of applicants in my conversations with them. So I'll try to keep this brief because I know you're all working pretty hard, but I wanted to make this resource available to you to kind of go over a lot of what I've been hearing and that's been coming up. So of course, we're here today to talk about the Ulster County Cultural Service and Promotion Fund, which is dedicated to maintaining the artistic and cultural assets of Ulster County and to promote the county through arts and cultural activities which add to the economy and quality of life. We administer this program proudly on behalf of the Ulster County Legislature, and we are so grateful to them that they've been able to make these funds available to arts and cultural organizations in Ulster County in such a difficult year where many other organizations received cuts or weren't funded at all, and their commitment to funding arts and culture is really appreciated. So I encourage all of you to write to your county legislators and thank them for funding this again in 2020. As you know, the deadline is November 23rd, coming right up. It is due by 11:59 p.m. That is when the application will close. So I'll be available all day on that day to answer your questions. If you have a question, the best way to reach me is to email grants@artsmidhudson.org. And if you email me there, I'm able to, and we determine that we really need to speak by phone, then I'm happy to set up a time on that day to speak with you, or you can just email me and say, hey, we really need to speak by phone. I'm available at these times. That would be helpful as I'm coordinating a lot of different people at this time. Funding notification will be sent by early December. So really quickly, we're going to have our review panels as quickly as possible, get you funding notification. And if you are funded, you will receive your contract when you find out that you're funded. And we're going to need that back from you as soon as possible so we can process it and get you the funds before the end of the year. As you may have noticed in the guidelines, we did not put a start date for when activities could occur because really due to the delay with this legislature putting together their budget and determining contracts, really there is no start date that would have already passed. So what's most important is that activities must conclude by December 31st, 2021, and that any awarded funds must be spent by that date. I'm going to briefly go over the funding goals, and these there are 4 goals, and they're really critical to think about as you're crafting your writing. And most of you should already have your plan of what you're planning to apply for, but linking those plans to our goals is really a good way to show the review panel that you've read the guidelines, that you're aware of what the funds are trying to achieve, and that you are aligning your goals with our goals. So first is to support nonprofit arts organizations in Ulster County in efforts to grow, expand, or improve their work. So really, that's what capacity building initiatives do. And as you know, this funding is only for capacity building initiatives this year. To positively impact the arts and cultural scene of Ulster County by strengthening established arts organizations and benefiting residents and visitors. And so we're really trying to, through this fund, strengthen the existing Ulster County arts organizations and cultural organizations. And really in 2020, this means due to the effects of COVID, in some cases, bringing organizations closer or, getting them closer to the capacity that they were at before COVID-19 hit. And how does that strengthening of the organization then benefit the residents who live in Ulster County and people who visit? So that's something to keep in mind as you're writing and finishing up your proposal. How can you drop in a few lines here and there within the application to note how this is going to benefit the community at large and how it makes Ulster County a more enticing place for visitors to come to? Especially, I'll take a step back, but, right now it may not be safe to travel, but how are any of these efforts going to make Ulster County strengthen your organization so that when people are able to visit us again, you're going to be able to receive them in a safe way and continue to be available to serve our region. So the next two goals: support for arts and cultural organizations led by Black, Latinx, Indigenous, Asian, people of color, LGBTQ+, and or disabled arts workers. So we are very serious at Arts Mid-Hudson about trying to support as many arts and cultural organizations as possible who are represented by these groups, because we firmly believe that if you are trying to reach out to these groups and serve them better through your work, it's important to have people in positions of power who are representing those groups themselves or a part of those groups. So if you are trying to do a specific outreach effort to one of these groups that's listed here through your project, or expand your audience, or take on some diversity, equity, inclusion training, I've heard a couple of requests about that. Then to be sure that you're hiring people who, or maybe hiring a consultant, or going to people who represent these groups if you're trying to reach out to those groups. And then the next goal is assist arts organizations in adapting to social distancing requirements. And so this is really a major one this year. I think that most of the submissions submission ideas that I've heard about talking to different organizations connect in some way to responding to COVID-19. And I think that's going to be really important this year. It's going to be very difficult for our panel to take that out of the conversation, especially as we are seeing rising cases and the need for more places to adapt in new ways to what is happening. And so even if your project is something that is generally capacity building for your organization and could be capacity building in this year or another year, try to find ways to relate it to COVID-19 and how this is better preparing you to serve your audience or expand your audience and continue to do your work. Many of you know who can apply. You must be but I'll go over it real quickly. You must be a 501c3 nonprofit that is incorporated in Ulster County, and you must identify arts and or cultural services as a primary activity in your mission. Have to be incorporated in Ulster County and must have at least 3 years of programming history. Fiscal sponsorship is being accepted this year. You won't see, we're taking them on a case-by-case basis. So if you have not done so already, please reach out directly to me and I will pass along relevant information for you that you'll need in order to submit your application. And you can send an email to grants@artsmidhudson.org to get that. And again, this is the email to send all questions to at this point. That way I can respond to you quickly and make sure that you have everything you need in order to submit. So I'll just leave this quote here. Feel free to pause the video and read this, but it's a really nice description of what capacity building is. And there's a link here. I'll include it when I send out this video with just a great description and some tools from the National Council on Nonprofits on what capacity building is. So some eligible capacity building initiatives are many of the projects I'm hearing about already. So consultant fees for activities such as strategic planning, succession planning, board development, or diversity, equity, and inclusion. New or expanded staff positions, and this year this also includes bringing back furloughed staff. That's a question that I'm getting a lot, and so that is perfectly fine. And just touch base with me if you're having questions about how to answer some of the questions on the application if you are bringing back furloughed staff. And so this goes back to what I spoke about before. We're not thinking about your capacity right now necessarily as what your capacity was in 2019. We're in 2020, and your capacity likely has diminished due to COVID-19. And so bringing back a furloughed staff bringing back staff, or paying their salaries would typically be viewed as general operating support. But if they've been furloughed and you need to bring them back, you really are building your capacity back up to what it was before COVID-19 hit. So that is perfectly fine. And I would definitely encourage any organizations that are thinking about bringing back furloughed staff, at least partially through this funding, to go ahead and do so. Technology or equipment upgrades, especially those that are eligible for funding, and especially those that are related to COVID-19. Audience development or audience expansion, reminding people that that you're still doing programming, that you're going to be doing programming in the future when you're able to open up in person if you're not already. Or letting your audience know that you now are doing virtual programming if that's the case. So there's a lot of different ways you can think about audience development. improve ability to track outcomes. So these are efforts like getting a good donor management system in place so that you can track your donors and demographic or other information about who your audience is, better ways to track your engagement on your website and putting in services so that you're able to do that. Those are all eligible as capacity building initiatives so that you can better understand what you're doing well and identify ways that you can improve your work. And then really efforts to respond to COVID-19. This is kind of could apply to any of these categories that I listed above. So in the next slide, I'm going to just give a couple of the questions that have come up a few times, especially about some of the specific capacity building initiatives that I'm hearing about. And so for new or expanded staff positions, again, or bringing back furloughed staff, if you are hiring a new person, you're going to be asked how the job will be posted. And this is important because especially right now, if it's a brand new position or a consultant position, the panels are going to want to see that this is going to be an open opportunity and that you're going to be able to make this an opportunity that's available to the general public. If the individual is already identified, or if they've worked with you previously and it's going to be a continuing relationship, maybe an offshoot of off a previous project or initiative, then that's fine. And just make sure you mark the appropriate or check the appropriate boxes on the application so those questions are revealed to you and you can give us all of the information that we need about that individual. If they are for bringing back furloughed staff, I think you should just go ahead and check new, and then that way you can provide some information about that individual. You'll be asked, you'll want to include how this position will be sustained, and you'll see on the application there's a specific question that asks how the initiative will be sustained. This is really critical to capacity building initiatives because this is how you show how this investment in 2020 is going to have a ripple effect on the organization and allow you to grow not just in 2021 during the funding period, but beyond. And so especially for staff positions, noting if you're going to be seeking additional funds to expand or continue their hours, if you're going to maybe their work is going to generate revenue or income or fundraising for the organization that will then sustain their position. And if it's a one-time consultancy, noting that and letting us know why it's appropriate for this to just be a one-time consultancy. And if that person is going to train any staff members that are then going to be able to carry on their work, if necessary. For expanded staff hours, include their new tasks. So if you're expanding an existing staff person's hours, then it's important to explain what they'll be doing, what are the new tasks that they're going to be expanded into, and especially if you had to reduce a staff person's hours due to COVID-19 and you want to bring them back up to what they were or partially what they were through some of the funding, then that's going to be important to show, what hit has been taken to the organization because this staff person has not been able to do A, B, and C tasks. So it's important to talk about specifically what that person will be doing. And you'll be asked to include a resume if any individual is already identified for a position to show their relevant experience. For technology and equipment upgrades, consider you'll want to talk about why you're choosing the equipment or technology that you're choosing. And so customized versus off the shelf. Some say, for example, you're getting a new website. This will likely be a customized effort. Or if you are getting some software for your computer to be able to do video editing or streaming or other things that maybe you need upgrades to your existing software to do this, then are those just going to be an off-the-shelf version like the Adobe Suite or Microsoft Office or one of those or other programs, then just listing what they are and why you've identified those as your choices for software that you're going to purchase. Talk about your capacity to use and maintain any new equipment that you're purchasing or any new software you're getting, especially you may be noting who will be, if you're going to get some video editing software, who's the video editor on staff that's going to be able to work with this? And is there any training that that person is going to have to undertake in order to work with this new technology? Benefit to organization or audience needs need to be clearly defined. So that means that basically you want to talk about why now, and you'll probably hear me say this again. It's important to talk about why you need this now and what this is going to change in terms of what you're able to do as an organization, how you're going to be able to strengthen internally, and how that your audience will benefit. And so this is funding from the Ulster County Legislature to strengthen arts organizations, with the hope that this will have a ripple effect in the county and the general public will benefit. So make that connection between, if you're asking us to buy you a new laptop, for example, then how does the county benefit from your organization having that laptop, and what does it enable you to do differently, and how will it enable you to better serve Ulster County and visitors to Ulster County? And then also it's important to note, what is the lifespan for new equipment? There's no such thing as evergreen equipment. All equipment is, ultimately going to need to be upgraded. But talk about, if you're upgrading from a sound system, how long did the last sound system, last you? And what is the hope that you'll be able to get? How much time do you think you'll be able to get out of this equipment? And that just goes to understanding what the equipment is and how it's going to be cared for and maintained so that it can have as long a lifespan as possible. And just another quick note, if you are buying equipment or software, sometimes it's really easy just to put those items in a shopping cart in B&H or Amazon or wherever you're getting that stuff from, and then just take a screenshot of it and you'll show us this is the exact equipment, this is exactly how much it costs, and that's a really clear way to supplement your budget and show how you've identified which equipment you'd like to use. When we're evaluating capacity building initiatives, we use 3 main areas of evaluative criteria, and I'll run through them now. They're really important for you to keep in mind as you're, looking over your application. Maybe you have a draft at this point and are trying to make some edits and make sure that it's up to par. And think about these evaluative criteria as you're doing that, because this is how you'll be scored. And if you score highly in these categories, then you're more likely to get closer to your requested funding amount. So the first is artistic merit of the organization or programming to be enhanced by the initiative. And so obviously this isn't project support, but we still, it's really important for panels to get a sense of your regular work. What is the artistic merit the existing artistic merit of the organization, and especially any relevant programming that's going to be directly enhanced due to your capacity building initiative. So include a work sample with your application. These could be photos of your events, screenshots of your virtual programming, videos, letters of support also go a long way, especially if they're from individuals that you're working with or artists that you've worked with. So I would strongly encourage some visual aids to include in your application, because for any grant proposal that you're writing, you really want to write as if the people reviewing it on the other end don't know anything about you, have never heard of you before, and you're kind of introducing them to your work. Because most likely, people on the panel will be familiar with you, especially if you're an arts organization that's been around in Ulster County for many years. But there may be somebody who's not, and you don't want them to have to do the research on their own. You want to show them the quality of your work and what you've been able to achieve. Impact. So impact really goes 2 ways. It goes for the impact on the applicant organization and the impact on the residents of Ulster County and visitors. So this goes back to kind of making those connections to how is this initiative going to strengthen your organization? Why is it critical now? Maybe how does it relate to COVID-19, and how is it getting you back on track as far as getting closer to the capacity you were at before COVID-19 hit? And then what is the ripple effect for the county? How does the county benefit from a strengthened organization? And then the last evaluative criteria is feasibility and evidence of planning in place to execute the proposed initiative. So this really means that the proposal makes sense. It's clear to understand. It seems doable. There's a strong committee or there's a strong team in place to execute the project that you're proposing, that you've identified all of the, that your budget makes sense, the timeline makes sense, all of those things that work together to show that the panel that this is a feasible application and it's likely to be able to be completed in the way you've described. And then a final consideration that, isn't a area that we score on, but is a consideration throughout the panel meeting, is the ability of the organization to meet evaluation and reporting requirements. And so this goes to, really demonstrating that you've put all of the components together for the proposal, everything is there, everything is clear, and that, maybe you've been funded by us before and you've already submitted reports to us. And so you have a track record. So just keep in mind that's something they'll be thinking about as well, because reporting to us is really important, because that's what myself and Linda, our executive director, uses to advocate to the Ulster County Legislature and try to make sure that not only do we continue this fund, but we continue to expand it, which we have up until really this year, where, as many of you know, we did receive a cut to this funding program, which honestly was to be expected given the economic situation that the county and the country finds itself in. So now I just want to go over some quick tips about what I feel will be most competitive for this round of funding. And I'll preface this by saying I have never done a review panel in a COVID-19 environment. This is a completely different thing. I've facilitated dozens of review panels, and I have my experience from those to indicate where I think this will likely go. But of course, panels are groups of individuals who really ultimately make the funding recommendations. So no Arts Mid-Hudson staff or board votes on these proposals. We simply facilitate the conversation and guide the conversation so the volunteer review panel can make an informed decision. And so my general feeling at this point is that they are going to want to spread the wealth as much as possible. And by that, I mean, they're going to, I feel, be looking for reasons to fund organizations rather than nitpicking and looking for reasons why not to fund organizations. Because of the situation that we find ourselves in with COVID-19, where really there is a high need for assistance to arts organizations, and especially ways that they can grow and adapt to COVID-19. So I, think this is going to be a competitive year. And so I would just like to manage your expectations and let you know that you are likely to get less than the funding you request. And that's why it's important to make sure that you're noting, you're hitting some of the goals that we've laid out for the program, and that you are putting in, I'll hit on the first point, a highly feasible and very straightforward initiative. You've probably heard me say this if we've had a conversation or if you attended one of the Q&A sessions. I really am encouraging applicants to select really straightforward initiatives, maybe something that you've already been thinking about or planning for, so that, of course, with this shortened timeline, you can get it in on time. But it can also be something that the panel can kind of get behind very quickly and see as a very feasible path for the organization, and something that, you're going to be able to achieve. I've said it a bunch of times now, but I'll just say it quickly again. Of course, if it's responding to COVID-19, that is just my indication from conversations from, over the past couple of weeks about this program. Most applicants, in my view, are using the funds to respond or adapt to COVID-19 restrictions in some way. So even if your initiative could have existed beyond this environment, I think it's going to be important to link it in terms of how you're how this is relevant and why this is critical to do now, and how it's helping strengthen your organization so you can continue to thrive despite this horrible situation we all find ourselves in. Sustainable. So that question on the application that asks how you will sustain this initiative beyond the funding period, that's really important because it, again, shows how this investment this year is going to continue to help sustain help your organization grow in the future. And so talking about, for example, if you're hiring a new person, how you will try to keep them on board, if you'll be seeking additional funding, or if their work is going to translate into hopefully more funding coming into the organization or increased revenue. If you're buying equipment, how it's going to be maintained and cared for, who will be working with it. If you are doing strategic planning, how are you going to implement that in years to come, and how is that going to be, who's going to carry on the work beyond maybe hiring a consultant to do strategic planning with the board? Whose responsibility is it to make sure that work continues and becomes ingrained within the organization? Having clearly defined goals. So this really means that, you're aligning your goals with ours, but you're also very clearly within the proposal stating why this is important to your organization and what you're trying to achieve. And typically that will find itself within the initiative description. You'll probably be describing what you're planning to do with the initiative, and then providing some overall goals that you're trying to meet. And kind of answering the why this is important now. Measurable success. So this is, there's a specific question that will ask how you'll measure the success of the program. And so this is a place for you to show that you have methods in place to track the success of whatever initiatives you're trying to do. So this might be check-ins with a new staff person, or surveys sent out to your audience to gauge whether the new website you launched is working for them, or if you are doing a new marketing campaign, if this is going to if you have some metrics that you'd like to meet in terms of an expanded audience or expanded audience numbers in specific areas or demographics. So talk about how you'll track whether or not the goals you lay out are being met. And then, of course, efforts which increase access to arts and cultural programming. So any capacity building initiatives that you're trying to do, again, strengthen the arts and or cultural organization, and then how does this increase access to the general public? How does this enable more individuals in Ulster County to experience the arts and culture in their lives? So jumping back to the review process, I'll quickly go over how they are determined. Again, no Arts Mid-Hudson staff or board makes funding determinations. We facilitate a volunteer review panel, which will be held virtually this year. So we're going to try and get it done as quick as we can. I expect a high volume of applications, but we're going to do our best to get it done so that we can get this funding out by the end of the year. But we'll be determining awards first on eligibility. Really, that's my job, to read through all of the applications and ensure that everything is eligible for funding. And I really encourage, I didn't go too far into eligibility today because I really wanted to stay focused on tips that will just generally help you put together a stronger proposal, especially at the, that we're so close to the deadline at this point. But you are, please take a look at the guidelines for full eligibility criteria so that you can make sure everything is in line with what we are able to fund. The clarity of the proposal. So, I tell all of our review panels that we are less concerned about the style of writing or, small errors here and there in terms of grammar or spelling. But what's most important is that we can understand the proposal and that it's clear. And so you want to make sure that not only you're reviewing your proposal closely, but maybe ask a trusted colleague or friend to take a look at it and make sure that they're understanding what you are setting forth. And this goes back to what I said earlier. You want to write as if the people on the other end know nothing about you, the initiative, and you're really introducing it to them for the first time. Because ultimately, most likely there will be someone on the panel who isn't familiar with you. The evaluative criteria, which we talked about earlier, that's really critical. That's because we score that way. So it doesn't hurt to take another look at your application and try to look at it through the lens of the evaluative criteria. The funding priorities, which are the goals that are listed right at the beginning of the guidelines and earlier within this discussion. And so we're thinking about those as a whole through everything that the panel chooses to fund. Are we meeting the goals as best we can? The overall pool of applicants. So each application is reviewed individually. We have an individual conversation about each. At the end of each discussion, I get the scores based on the evaluative criteria from each panelist, and then we do a yes or no vote. All those applications that received a majority yes move on to the second round, where we then make the panel makes funding recommendations. So really, there's an individual phase and then there's a group phase where we're looking at them from highest average score to lowest average score, and the panel is then making recommendations about how much to fund, and that's when they start to think about the pool as a whole and think about it less individually. And I'll put this here, this really actually doesn't apply anymore. Compliance with reporting and guidelines in the past, due to COVID-19, I would encourage all of you, if there was some issues going on before 2020, then, that might be part of a conversation this year. Like, we have all final reports if you were previously funded, or if we never received a final report for you from 2018 or 2017 or something. But I am not looking at the negatives of the 2019/2020 funding, because a lot of those are just completely out of your control. So just know that any negative things that happened because of COVID-19 that affected your work for your 2019-2020 projects are not going to impact the review proceedings for this year. Some more quick application tips. Again, I recommend using simple language, answer the questions directly, and we don't need a long description. We really just need the facts of what the need is, how you've identified the need, for this initiative, the why now component, what exactly the initiative is, and what your overall goals are. So answer them directly and be clear, but provide specifics when needed so that they can really grasp what you're trying to do. Relate to the evaluative criteria and show evidence of those three: artistic merit, feasibility, and impact throughout. And then for the budget, you'll want to, I'm actually probably going to switch over and just show you the budget really quickly. When you receive this video in your email, you'll probably also be receiving a note about how there is a glitch on our website right now, and the budget form that is downloading off of there is not the budget form that I created for this year. You can use the old budget form. It is not a problem to us, but I am sending out the updated one to everybody because it is a bit cleaner and will likely be helpful to you. And one thing I just want to note, which is an error on the, that because it's on the old budget form, we will fund up to 100% of your expenses for the initiative. On the old budget form, it says must be that we won't fund more than 75%. We changed that this year because of COVID-19. And so because we know that there's quite a need and there's everybody's in a very bad economic situation. And so we will fund up to 100%. You'll see that note is not on the new budget form. So I hope that message gets to everybody. And I'll just go over these notes real quick, and then I'm going to jump over and just show you the budget really fast. So of course, you're going to include all expenses related to the proposal on the budget. Your narrative and your budget must match, which means the last thing you want is for the panel to get to your budget when they're reviewing your application and be surprised about a line item that they see there. You want to make sure any line items that you're asking us to pay for, especially on the budget, are clearly described within the narrative, and that there's consistency. So if you state somewhere in the narrative that you're going to hire a consultant and it's going to be a $700 fee, and then they read the budget and it says $1,000 for the consultant, then they're going to wonder which is the correct number. So especially as you're working, make sure you're going back and reviewing your work and making sure that if you change something along the way, that you've changed it in all places. Please use our provided budget form, and again, you can use the one that's downloading off our website or the one I'm going to send you by email. And then a helpful formula is project expenses minus project income equals request amount. And so if you have any additional funding coming in, like maybe you have another foundation grant, or you're going to use some workshop fees that you got from a program to put towards this initiative, whatever it might be, you can subtract that. So any income that you're getting, any other existing income that you have for the project, if those are going towards your expenses, then project expenses minus project income will equal the amount you need from us. So it's basically the gap between your expenses and your income that is an appropriate request amount. If you have no income, then you can take all that middle part out, and it's really project expenses equals request amount. Okay, so now I've pulled up the budget. I just opened it up in Google Sheets so we could take a quick look at it. And when you download it from the email I sent you, or if you're downloading the version from the website, it will download as an Excel file. You're welcome to use that in Microsoft Excel or to open in Google Sheets. And so I just wanted to point out quickly in the new version, you'll see that the in-kind section is no longer here. This is because the only reason we've ever included an in-kind section on the budget is because we allowed that to make up that 25% that we wouldn't fund of the total cost of the project. But since we can fund up to 100% of the cost of the project or the initiative this year, then we really don't need to see in-kind or donated goods or services. And so here, please this is only a cash budget. So include only items that represent actual cash. At the top, this is the revenue or income section. It's broken into earned income and contributed income. Again, if this section is completely blank, that is okay, because we will fund up to 100% of your expenses. And earned income and contributed income, really for earned income, typically there isn't much that people end up putting here, but if you are using some income that you earned in some way through admissions or workshops or membership that you're going to put towards this initiative, you can list it here. Contributed income, these are things like donations, a contribution from the organization, or grants, corporate donations or foundation grants. You can list those here. It's important to note whether they are actual or pending. And so I'll point out while we're looking at this, the explanation column is really important because this is how you show us what this means. So for example, if you got a grant from the community foundations of the Hudson Valley, and you already received it and it's going towards this initiative, here you would write community foundation grant actual, meaning you already have it, and then you would write here the amount. So maybe it's $1,000. And so any income that you put up here will total out, and it will get copied into this summary section down here. And so then for your expenses, this is where you're going to explain what the expenses are associated with the initiative and which of those you are going to be requesting from us. So let's say that for this proposal, you're going to be expanding staff hours, and maybe it's going to be, well, let's make it a little easier since I'm going off the top of my head here. So let's say that you're going to be hiring a one-time consultant. And one thing to note in this section, it doesn't really matter to us where you place things within these cells as long as it's clear and it makes sense. So consultant could go under administrative. So let's say one-time consultant, and let's say that there's a $1,000 one-time fee. And let's just make this clear. So let's say consultant, $1,000 one-time fee. And so here, let's say the total project expenses is $1,000 and you're requesting that amount from us. It would be helpful in an actual proposal to maybe put the person's name here, just especially if there are multiple people involved in the project, that way that we can understand who you're talking about where. And then let's say for this that you're doing a website redesign or something, and the consultant's going to be working on that, but you also need to pay a web designer or a coder or something like that. So let's say web designer, and that's going to be a $2,000 one-time fee. And so here the total expense is $1,000, but looking above, maybe you got this $1,000 grant from the community foundation to put towards the web designer. And so here we're going to write that you only need $1,000 from us for that expense. And so what I've done here is I've, taken into account my income and my expenses, and in this column to the right, the funding request column, I've written in what you are asking the Arts Mid-Hudson Ulster County Cultural Service and Promotion Fund to pay for. And so this funding request now is $2,000. The total expenses are $3,000, and you have $1,000 coming in from elsewhere. And so when you scroll down to the summary section, you'll see the total expenses here as $3,000, revenue is $1,000, and the grant request is $2,000. And we have this nifty tool in here that shows you that, yes, this does balance. If I had put in here that I wanted $2,000 for it, it would say no, revenue plus funding request exceeds expenses. It basically shows that you're asking us for too much funding because you've shown above that you have $1,000 coming into the project already. It will also show you the percentage that you are asking us to fund. We kept this on this year because it's usually helpful to a panel, and so then you can kind of see how that is going and how much you're asking us to fund out of the total expenses. If you run out of space within this column, then please be sure to use the additional budget note section. Say here you knew that it was just going to be too long to write out. You could just say see budget note number 1, and then down here, write number 1, and then your description of what you were going to write there. That's really important because when you export this, you're going to export it to a PDF, and we're not going to be able to expand any of these cells. So please make sure once you export that everything that was visible, that everything that you want us to read is visible to you, because if you can't read it when you export it to PDF, we will not be able to read it either. Okay, so that's about it. I just wanted to go over some things that were coming up often, and I'm sure you all will have many questions, and hopefully this is more clarifying than creating more questions. But if it is creating questions for you, please send me an email to grants@artsmidhudson.org, and that is really the best way to reach me. I am going to be checking my email all weekend. I know that there's, this is a really quick turnaround, and I'm really grateful to all of you for working with us and embracing this and understanding that we simply need to get the funds out by the end of the year. And although this is not the best timeline, we're really grateful for the legislature to making the funding available to us at all. So emailing grants@artsmidhudson.org is the best way to go, especially on the weekend. Or you can call our office, 845-454-3222. I will not be able to answer the phone, but you're welcome to leave a voicemail. My extension is 11 if you're just trying to get to it quick, but you'll hear it if you listen to the menu. And let me know what your questions are in the voicemail and the best way to reach you, especially if there's a certain time that's good to reach you. If you want me to look over your budget or your application, we're kind of running out of time for me to be able to do that. But if you want me to take a look at a section of your application or the budget, I can do that typically pretty quickly. So there's no harm in just throwing it in my, throwing an email and sending it to me, and I will work my hardest to get back to all of you and answer all your questions. So please feel free to put that in my email, and I'll do the best to get back to you. And I don't think there are any more appointments available, but please check here at artsmidhudson.org. artsmidhudson.youcanbook.me. That's where I have individual appointments, and I'm going to put a few more on Monday just to be able to accommodate a couple longer conversations. So please feel free to make an appointment there if necessary. And again, my name is Lilia Perez. I'm the Grants and Programs Manager for ArtsMid-Hudson. Happy to answer any of your questions, and I hope that this was helpful to you. I tried to keep it brief. I'm looking at the time now and seeing it's not as brief as I want it to be, but hopefully the information was helpful to you. All right, happy writing and have a great weekend, and I hope to talk to you soon.